Hi, what is up? Today I am reviewing another science fiction short story, this time from the author Kurt Vonnegut, entitled Harrison Bergeron. Okay, this piece of work was written back in 1961. Okay, and in fact, during those times, you'll find out later this is a bit on the soft side. This is a soft science fiction, and in fact, during those times in the 50s and in the 60s, Vonnegut was among those writers, including like Ray Bradbury, the famous author of Fahrenheit 451. These guys, they want the labeling of science fiction to be lifted from their work, because during those times in the 50s and the 60s, there's like a prejudice against science fiction. It's not serious enough, it's not literary enough, and so if you're like into creative writing, if you want to voice out your concerns about social political issues like that, and then you label your work as sci-fi, then a lot of people won't take you seriously. Of course, that has changed during the modern times, because of course we know right now that there are a lot of works in science fiction that can be serious. And again, for me personally, I don't care if like it's literary or not, as long as it's sci-fi. It's a personal preference of mine. Okay, but yeah, let's talk about this short story. It's a very short story, and it talks about a time in set in 2081 in the United States, whereby, so according to the book, in the introduction, it says that in 2081, everybody is already equal. Okay, not just before the law, or not just before the eyes of God, but in every which way possible. Okay, and of course, since the government have already realized that not everyone is born equal. Okay, so even today we know that, like, some people are born poor, some are born rich, and some are born with disabilities, and so on. So the government thought that it is up to them, to be intrusive and then do something about it, so that everyone is equal. No one is faster than somebody else. No one is more beautiful or more handsome than somebody else. No one is more intelligent than somebody else. And the way this was realized in Vonnegut's work it was really realized in a very exaggerated way, making this a very good satirical work. Okay, but anyway, this short story entitled Harrison Bergeron, it stars Harrison Bergeron's parents, Hazel and George. And yeah, the setting is that they were watching this television, and as explained in the work, Hazel is an average of an average intelligence a person, while her husband, George, is a little bit smarter. And in order to equalize that, what the government does is, okay, you're smart, right? So you wear like these headphones connected to the, like the government signal or whatever, such that every 20 seconds there's like a very irritating sound that goes through your ears. Okay, and so what happens is every 20 seconds you're like thinking about a particular train of thought. Okay, you're thinking about something. You can't pursue that train of thought because you have this very annoying sound in your ear. And of course, we all know, like, for example, if you want to study, or if you want to learn something, or if you want to think, that one of the best ways to do that is in a very calm, quiet environment like the library. But if you have like a very annoying noise, so in the story it's described like I don't know, like some gunshot, or the scraping of something on metal or something, some noise that we can't stand. Okay, so if you're of above intelligence, you wear those headphones, just like George. And yeah, they're watching television, and yeah, they're talking to each other. And you can see there in the television that they were watching, you have this ballerina that were dancing. Okay, and then those ballerinas that, of course, that were, for example, graceful, you can see them, there are weights connected to their bodies, because, hey, how come you're good at dancing? That's unfair. Okay, so now they have weights so as to equalize with those other people who are not very good at dancing. So these ballerinas, they wore weights. And the funny thing is, every time that, so they're watching, every time George winces, there's something that sounds in his earphone. The ballerina as well on the television, they also like react in the same way. So in other words, you can see that, so it's not only George that's being subjected to that kind of, equality headphone thing, but also the other people who were deemed to be more intelligent than an ordinary person. Okay, so basically they were watching on the news, and then suddenly there was a news break. It's because so before that they actually have this son known as Harrison Bergeron, 14 years old. He is way above average in everything else. He was smart, he was handsome, he was athletic, and so on. And the government thought, he is trying to overthrow the government or something. It wasn't really fleshed out, but the idea is he was taken because he was, over the top, too talented, very. The term is very under handicapped, right? Why are you so smart? Why are you so handsome? Why do you have everything? Yeah, so he was taken into prison. But then during that time when they were watching the ballerina, there was like a sudden news break. And the funny thing is, so in the news break, typically when we watch the news, typically the news anchors are very good in speaking. "Oh, we break this for some sudden news break or whatever." But in that particular case, the news anchor, he actually stutters like, "Good evening, we watched the break." And so what happens is that they had to cut the news break and then ask one of the ballerinas to read the news herself, because yeah, the viewers couldn't understand. But yeah, he given a chance even though he stutters, because again, equality for everyone. Okay, and again, the news is that their son Harrison Bergeron escaped from prison. Don't engage this man. This man is very dangerous because he's like above everyone else. So like that, he's very dangerous. And then while the ballerina was reading that warning, suddenly Harrison Bergeron barged into that area where they are showing the ballerina with the music and stuff. He barged in the area, and then in front of everyone else, and of course in front of the camera, watching television. Of course, everybody was afraid of him because they were told that this guy is over the top. So he is a dangerous man. So what he did is, since he was very athletic and stuff, he had a lot of like uh, what do you call this? He had a lot of weights on him, and since he was handsome, he had a red the thing that you see in the clowns, the one on the nose, and then his teeth had to be, since he had a very nice smile, his teeth had to be randomly colored black at different places. But what he did is he went in front, in the act of defiance against the imposition by the government. He got all his weights. He removed the things on his faces. He had a spectacle that limits his vision a little bit because he had a very perfect vision. Why do you have a perfect vision? And then some other people have poor vision, so they place like some things that will lessen his the perfection of his vision. So he removed all of those things, and then he said, I am the emperor, like bow before me. And then from the group of ballerina, he said, who wants to be my queen? And then one of the ballerina, raised her hand, and then in there they danced together, and in the act of like showing people what it could be like if you see an act of perfect excellence. When people really put all of their talent into something, it should look like this. So Harrison Bergeron invited a ballerina, and then one of the ballerina raised, and then he said, "Music, give me music." And then the musicians were like, "Oh," and then he said, "I want you to remove like all your constraints. Play me a perfect music as you can." So the musicians, removed all their the hindrances that made them that deter them from being a playing on their maximum skills. So they did that, and then they played the music. And yeah, Harrison Bergeron and the girl, they danced on the television for a while. Everybody was like in trance and so on. But then eventually, the head of the United States, it's called United States Handicapper General, okay, and it's a woman named, I think, Diana, okay. So she barged in there, bring a shotgun, and then she shot like the Harrison Bergeron and then the ballerina. That they were dead, and then she pointed the shotgun on the musicians. I give you 10 seconds to put back your handicaps, okay? If not, then you'll be dead like that guy. And so that was televised, so everyone really saw that if you went against the government, the punishment is death, okay? And while this was happening, okay, Hazel and George were watching in their television, and then Hazel was like, there was tears in her eyes, but then again, since she was of the average intelligence, eventually the television cut out, and then she couldn't recall why she was crying, and George was like, hey, why were you crying? And she's like, I had no idea. There's like this sad thing on the television. And of course, without them realizing that that was actually their son. Of course, they realized before that, but then due to the imposition, and of course, George's like earphones, like he cannot complete a train of thought, then they just forget about it, right? So it's like you have your son on television, shot on the TV, and then your the parents themselves, it's like they felt something, they felt sad, but then they didn't even realize that afterwards that it was their son that died. Okay, and then that's how it ended. Like the way it ended, it was written very nicely by Vonnegut, because it's like her wife, every time something sounds on the earpiece of George, she'll be like, "Oh, that must have been a doozy," because George will be like, will flinch like that. Okay, so in the last part, George flinched, and then Hazel was like, "Oh, that must have been quite a doozy," and then George said, "You can say that again," and then. Oh, literally, Hazel said it again. Oh, that must have been quite a doozy. Okay, so it was a nice structure at the end. Okay, but yeah, I can see why this short story is a classic. And in fact, I look at the internet. There was there were films made based on it. There were like short films based after the short story. And in fact, it's like a required reading for, like, I don't know, like grade 10 or grade 8 students in the United States. And I can see why, because it sparks a very nice discourse or discussion regarding the concept of equality, the concept of equal rights. Okay, but again, before we delve into that, again, I want to emphasize that this is one of the things that I mentioned is a soft science fiction. Okay, so soft science fiction, they uses a little bit of like science, in this case a little bit of futuristic gadgets that makes everyone equal, but instead of it being after reading it, instead of questioning the nature of reality or the nature of scientific laws, it makes you question social issues, political issues, the problems in our society, which is of course good. But again, me personally, I find hard science fiction, I find them more interesting. Of course, there's nothing wrong with liking soft science fiction. There are a lot of like science fiction out there that are soft, but then that are still very good. For example, this one, Those Who Walk Away from Omelas by Le Guin, and so on. But yeah, it's a personal preference of mine to read to like science fiction that at the end, instead of making me question about societal problems, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, that is a good thing. But me personally, I want a sci-fi short story that after reading makes me question about the laws of physics, the laws of science, and so on. For example, Isaac Asimov's The Last Question, the entropy. What's entropy about? But anyway, let's discuss what the Harrison Bergeron is trying to tell us. So again, this idea of equality, it really it shows what happens when you pushes equality to its literal limits. Okay, because the idea is, when you hear the word equality, it sounds like a very good thing, But the question is, where do you draw the line when you are trying to impose equality? And of course, Kurt Vonnegut showed in this short story that if you take that line so far, then you will have this very ridiculous dystopian government where people are not anymore allowed to shine, to be individualistic, to push the innate talents that they have. Okay, so that's the problem. And in fact, sometimes there's this thing where I saw this picture where they differentiate from the semantics of there's this thing called equality, and there's this thing called equity, whereby when you say equality, literally you give the same thing to everyone else. But of course, that has a negative side effect, because again, everyone is not born equal, and so if you give the same thing to everyone else, in the end they will still not be equal. So there's this picture where it shows a very nice thing where there's a wall, and then there's like a game on the other side of the wall, and then three people are watching. One is very tall, the other one's a bit short, and the other one is very, very short. Okay, and then when you impose equality on the three of them, so the three of them were given a boxes to where they can climb on top of, so that they can see over the wall. But if you impose equality, everyone is given the same height of box, the shortest guy still could not see beyond the wall. Okay, but then if you give them equity, equity is you consider what they had have in the first place. So the tall guy, since you're already tall, you get a little box that is not that tall, and then the shortest guy gets the longest box. Okay, and I think that's an important distinction, because in fact that's usually what our government is doing right now. It's basically giving everyone their civil rights. So everyone is given a chance to, everyone is given the opportunity to be successful in whatever they want. So the government in the beginning, they try to level the playing field so that you have what it takes to succeed in a society. So if you have, like, you don't have access to, like, health stuff, or you don't have access to education, most of the government gives you that. So, you're poor, you don't have education, so we give you free education because that's what you need, to survive. So, like, vaccination or health or medicine, you can't afford that, but you need that to survive in our society. Okay, here you go. Okay, so that's like equity. Okay, and in fact, the weird thing about this, the short story. So in this short story, at first you will be like disturbed, like, what's wrong? Like, the government is imposing equality, but how come it's like a weird society? And the reason is because this equality is forced. So for one thing, the equality is being forced on everyone. Okay, and again, there's a difference between forced equality and, the civil rights, or the human rights that we have. So it, first of all, it shouldn't be forced, and the other thing is, it shouldn't be, when you trying to impose equity, it should be what they call this, it should be at the expense of bringing other people up, instead of bringing other people down. Okay, so in other words, so for example, in the early 1900s, women were not allowed to vote, right? It's only men were only given the right of suffrage. As you can see, it's not equal. But instead of like, how come men can't vote? How come women can't vote? Then everyone shouldn't vote. No, it shouldn't be like that. So you have to bring those other people who don't have that opportunity up, instead of bringing them down. So the problem with the story is, they look at those people at the bottom rung of the ladder, and then they pull everyone down, instead of looking at those guys on top and then bringing other people on top with them. Okay, so that's the main difference. So instead of, you have an intelligent guy, and then you have someone who have an average intelligence. Oh, why are you so intelligent? You bring you down. Okay, so it shouldn't be like that. It should be the other way around, where, so you have an average intelligence. Let's help you. Let's, give you education and stuff like that. So that's how if the government wants equity to be enforced, it should be in a way where it doesn't burden other people. Okay, so yeah, so that's the main thing. So again, it's good. It allows you to the short story opens up this discussion regarding equality and, privilege and your right as a person. And if you try to impose, what happens if you take the imposition of equality too far. Okay, so personally, yeah, it's a good science fiction in a sense. So a lot of famous science fiction that actually gets discussed in, like, the literature circles, or in the serious literary circles, are actually these types of stories where, it, again, like I said before, it allows you to tackle the issues in this satirical manner. Okay, but again, personally, when I read, especially when I read science fiction short stories for fun, I want them to be hard. Okay, hard science fiction. But again, I don't like, as long as a short fiction is labeled sci-fi, then I have no problem with it. It's just that it's a personal preference of mine to love hard science fiction. But nevertheless, I'm gonna rate this short story, and I think, yeah, it's a good short story. I'm gonna rate it 8 out of 10, just like my rating for the short story I read last week, which was Axiomatic by Greg Egan. So I give this 8 out of 10. I can see why it's a classic, and I invite you to read it as well if you haven't. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and I hope next week you will come back for another science fiction short story review and discussion. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.